John chapter 9. John chapter 9, verses 39 through 41. And Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind." Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, "Are we blind also?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, 'We see.' Therefore, your sin remains." We live in a day when judging is considered taboo, inappropriate. Even the civil judges, especially in our area, for some obvious reasons, some fair, some unfair, have a bad reputation. To judge is a negative thing today, isn't it? Especially those outside the church, although sometimes those in the church will ask the question, "Who are you to judge me? Who are you to judge me?" Sometimes people even have the boldness to say, "God alone is my judge." Well, according to our text, John 9:39, this is true. Christ came into the world for judgment. Christ came into the world for judgment. Something you won't find on Christmas cards, I suspect. But it's something that the Bible teaches, isn't it? Now, when we say that Christ came into the world for judgment, we need to wrestle with other texts of the Bible which on the surface say just the opposite. In fact, Jesus himself says just the opposite. John chapter 12, just a few chapters later, verses 48 through 47, Jesus again asserts that he came into a dark world as the light, and then he says, "If anyone hears my words and does not believe, I do not judge him." Now, that's not what you'd have expected, is it? After having read John chapter 9, where Jesus said, "For judgment I come into the world." Jesus goes on, "For I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. He who rejects me and does not receive my words has that which judges him. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day." So, let's be honest. Jesus says, "I have come into the world for judgment," and then later says, "I have come into the world not for judgment." Which one is it? Well, it's both. It's both. And it's both because Christ's coming exposes the judgment which already exists. His coming, in a sense, sets a divine seal on the word that will judge unbelievers on the last day. And this is why Jesus also says in John 3, verse 17, "For God did not send his Son," well, either Jesus said this or John, there's some dispute, but the text says, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God." So, Jesus can say, I didn't come into the world to judge, because he's saying, by me coming into the world, I'm exposing, as the light of the world, a judgment which already exists. And in that sense, he can say, I come into the world to judge. You see, light forces us to face reality, in a sense. Light forces us to face reality. Say you're in a dark room, a dimly lit living room. You're not going to notice the stains on the carpet. You might not notice the peeling wallpaper. But you also might not notice the beautifully or elaborate and ornate woodwork around the windows and doors. So there are some good things in that room, there are some bad things in that room, but it's dark, you can't see. When the light comes into the room, it judges, doesn't it? By exposing the good and the bad. In a sense, likewise, the coming of Christ in the flesh, as well as the coming of Christ through the preaching of the Word, forces the issue which might otherwise be disregarded until the final judgment. Jesus is saying, the light has shone, and it exposes you. It exposes you. When Christ came, those who knew that they were blind were made to see by the light of Christ and the gospel. And those who thought they could see, that is, those who thought they were righteous, were blinded by the radiant righteousness of Jesus. So Jesus says, I've come to bring judgment. He also says, I've not come to bring judgment. Part of the reason for the difference between the two texts, and I think this helps us with application, part of why in John 9 he says, I've come to judge, and part of why in John 12 he says, I did not come to judge, has to do with the context. What is the context of a passage? Well, the context is the text around the text, with the text, with text. In John 9, please listen carefully so we don't miss this. In John 9, Jesus has standing before him the Pharisees, who were hardened in their unbelief. And to them Jesus says, I have come to this world for judgment. In John 12, we read that many believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they didn't confess him, lest they be put out of the synagogue, verse 42. To these people, according to verse 44 of John 12, Jesus cries out. He cries out, believe in me. Don't walk in darkness. Don't be judged by my word at the last day. So two different audiences, two different messages. I've come to judge. I've not come to judge. Which audience are you? Are you a weak, struggling believer in Jesus Christ who's strengthened by the light of the gospel as it shines into your heart? Or have you hardened yourself in unbelief? And it's to these primarily that Christ says, I have come for judgment.